It's a beautiful Sunday morning, at least from where I'm standing. And even though I wish you all the best, I really hope that it's raining outside for you, because that way you can just sit back and relax and enjoy this next video I'm going to show you. So anyway, you're watching Making It Look Great number 5. My name is Moltenan, and in this video I'm going to show you some basic functionality of Trapcode Form, and we're going to create some cool graphics using Trapcode Form. So let's take a look at what we'll be creating today. Ain't that cool? And even though it looks very complex, it's actually very simple to do. So let's get started. Here I have a footage of my very best friend Gregor, who's working with me at my studio. He's a 3D artist, and he took this footage to create his avatar that he can use on forums and maybe on his website as well. The website is going to be finecg.com, and it's going to hold video tutorials exclusively on 3D Studio Max. So stay tuned, another great tutorial resource is coming your way. So we're going to take this footage, and by using Trapcode Form, we're going to make it look great. Let's just start. Let us create a new composition from this footage. And there's nothing, there's not much that we actually have to do here, except that we're going to apply colorama. As you remember from the final render, we're not going to have too many colors. We're just going to have some basic shades of blue, and we're going to configure that in Trapcode Form. But before we start, we need to prepare this footage so that Trapcode Form acts the way we want it to. So first of all, I'm going to convert this into ramp gray, and this basically turns this image to black and white, as you see. And by using this color wheel, we can crush the blacks a little bit more and basically make this footage more intense. I don't want to see anything except his face and maybe a little bit of this shirt. So let's create another one. Now we're just making this look a little bit blown out. I don't like that look, so let's just make it just a little bit blown out and a little bit darker as well. And I think this should do just fine. And okay, so much for the preparation. Let's get to the interesting stuff. So let's create a new composition by dragging this comp into a make new comp button. We can call this final. And we need to turn this layer off because we're not going to use it as a visual. We're going to use it as a source for Trapcode Form. So to apply Trapcode Form, we need to create a new solid. And of course, we need to apply Trapcode Form. And here we go. Let me just turn off the transparency grid for now. And this is the default look of Trapcode Form. Not very interesting, but if we put the camera in and take the orbit camera tool, you see that those are basically 3 layers made of particles. And this is how the Trapcode Form looks in default. And let me just go quickly through the settings here. We can disperse the layers, we can twist the layers, we can do all sorts of stuff. We also have the very powerful fractal field that is present in particular as well, if you know that plugin. So let's just affect the size and affect the opacity a little bit, and maybe change the displace to a little bit something like that. So you get the point, right? You get the picture. So let's just reset all the options and get right to the interesting stuff. So the first things first, we need to change the amount of layers in Z space to 1, because we're not going to use more than 1. Well, maybe we're going to use it, but for now 1 is all we need. And the second thing, pretty important when using Form with any sort of footage as a source for displacements and other parameters, is to make it the same size as the footage. And our footage is actually 600 by 300, so let's just type that in and hit enter to confirm. And size in Z, we don't really need to touch that, so let's make it 0. And we need to also increase the density on each axis. As you see, when I increase the density here, the particles are getting more and more intense, and in the end we can get a solid layer like this. But this is way too much particles than we actually need, and after doing some tests I found out that for this purpose actually settings that are 150 and 75 is exactly what we need, and that is actually 1/4 of the resolution. That way we have a solid grid, and that works for us. So that's the basic setup. Now let's go to layer maps, and layer maps are where the power of Trapcode Form lies. So let's start with the color and alpha, and we choose the source layer, and that is our Greg layer, and the next parameter is to set what values of the layer we want to map to which values of Trapcode Form. And in this case we're going to take the lightness of the layer, because as you remember we made it black and white, and we're going to map it to the alpha of the particles. And the last step is to choose the map over parameter, which basically means on which axis we want to map the original footage to. So in our case X and Y is just fine. You can already start to see the footage being displayed in the particles, and this look is pretty interesting on its own, but we can make it look even better. So the next step would be changing the appearance of the particles. So let's just go to the particle section of Trapcode Form, and we can choose the glow sphere. And I found out that using a glow sphere with footage as a source really gets better results, because you can decrease the amount of particles while increasing the intensity of the footage, as you see in here. This is glow sphere and this is the regular sphere, so you see the difference, it's quite obvious. We can change the feather to 0, that makes it stand out even more, and we can increase the size of the particle to 2. I think that should, okay, yeah, that really makes the difference. So that's fine. And what else? Oh yes, colors, of course, colors. And we can go to quick maps, and here's the color map, and I'm actually going to use a preset, and this is the preset in here, and we want to map it over the Z just for now, because I think we're going to increase the amount of particles in Z, just like we had in the default configuration. We had 3 layers, so we're going to have multiple layers of Gregor, I think. You know what, maybe let's just try it right now. Why not? Let's increase the size in Z to 10 and particles in Z to 5, and this parameter is what actually makes the difference. Okay, this doesn't look so great, but that's because the particles are being blended in the additive mode, and we don't want that. We want it to be in normal mode, and oh yes, that makes the difference. And please note that we are working in 32 bits per channel, and to change this setting you need to hold the Alt key and click in here to change it from 8-bit to 32-bit. Okay, we got the color set, we've got the lightness to alpha set, and what else? We're going to use some displacement, so we can set it up right now, and we want to do it individually for each axis, because I'm only interested in displacing the particles on the Z-axis, so basically that they will go closer and further away from the camera. And the layer for that is also going to be Greg, and we need to set it over X and Y just like we did before. And oh yeah, we're already starting to see a difference here. And I think we can set the strength. Let's just see how it looks. It looks very interesting already, but that's not exactly the look that we were after. So let's just try something else. Let's set it up to -25. By doing some testing, I found out that this is the actual setting that works best in this case. And I can just put a quick camera to show you how that looks when we're going to orbit around it. Okay, this is interesting. This is interesting. I hope you already see how many possibilities lie with this simple technique. But let's stay focused on what we're actually doing, not on what we could do. And let's go ahead and make some other adjustments. We set the color in alpha, we set the displacement. I think that we can also set the size. Let me just check the transparency grid. Okay, that looks fine. But I think that if we're going to set the size as well, using the exact same settings, so layer, drag and map over X and Y, we're going to get some more interesting results. Oh yes, this looks a little bit more contrasty, and that starts to look really good. Okay, so let's just do some tidying up. Let's name this solid form face. And I think that the only thing left to do is to set up the camera movement, and that's basically it. So let's do that. Let's create a new camera once more. You can choose whatever preset works for you. I've chosen 35mm preset. It just kind of feels right. And we're going to create a new null object that is going to be our camera controller. Make sure to check the 3D switch. And we're going to parent the camera to our null. And okay, let's just find a nice place in the footage. I think I'd like the face to reveal itself at this point in time, more or less. So let me just go to the position and to the rotation properties. And we're going to set the X rotation and position keyframes in here, because those are the target keyframes. And just before that, we can set the rotation to 90 degrees. That should rotate the whole thing. Okay, that's fine. And let's go here. Let me just expand the view here. And let's just move a little bit closer like that. Okay, and I think we need to move upwards as well. Like so. And maybe even to the side. So we do kind of a pan through the particles before we see the face. And I think that's right. And now we can move this keyframe here. So that way we can get the overall look and feel of the animation. Okay, and it rotates and it stays like that. Very cool. I think that we can even start rotating it a little bit sooner, so maybe somewhere in here. That should do just fine. And the last thing to set up is to create the displacement. And we're going to do that by using fractal field. So let's just scroll down. Fractal field. Okay, here it is. And the first thing to do is to set the displacement. And I think that displacement should be pretty high, something around 100 or 150. That looks fine. And we can also set the flow. The flow parameter basically makes the particles look more wavy on a given axis, because form doesn't actually emit new particles. It just generates particles at the first frame based on the settings that you provide in the first section here, base form settings, and the amount of particles stays the same. But if you want to create the illusion of motion, you want to set the flow parameter. So I think that we can set the flow parameter across the y-axis. I'm just guessing y should do, and I think we did a little bit too much of the displacement. 100 should work just fine. Okay, but then again, let's just go back to our controller layer. We don't want any displacement in this point in time, so let's just go back to form and set a keyframe here, and here the displacement should be 0. Yes, and if we go back just a little bit, maybe halfway through the rotation here, and we're going to set the displacement to 100, and that should work just fine. I think it's time for a quick RAM preview to see what we've actually done so far, and then make some adjustments as we go. Okay, so let's see how it looks right now. We're probably going to need some easy ease keyframes on the position and the rotation, but we'll do that later on as we go. Okay, that's not so bad, but I think we need to make some small adjustments to the motion path, because as you can see, when the interesting thing happens, I mean when the camera rotates, we get the particles off screen, and we don't want that. So let's just try some easy ease keyframes, and I even think that we can move this part in here. Select all the keyframes and go Animation Keyframe Assistant Easy Ease or F9. And let's just check if this helps. Oh yeah, it did help. A little bit, but it did. I also think that we might try playing with the form settings with the strength of the displacement, and I think we can animate that as well. And I want it to be as it is at this point in time, so we kind of start seeing the face, but before that I want it to be much higher. So let's try maybe something like this, and also do some easy ease keyframes in here. And we can only hope that it will look okay, because working with that amount of particles is really CPU intense, so basically you have to check what you're doing once in a while by doing a RAM preview. But anyway, I think this should work. Let's just do the final camera move touch-up, and that would be zooming into the camera. Let's just choose the right frame. Okay, I think right about here should be a right place to set another position keyframe, and then let's just move 10 frames forward and zoom in very tightly. And a little bit more. Okay, and we want to start it with easy ease, but we want to make the end linear, so it slowly speeds up and then just goes into the warp speed, so the camera kind of flies through. And okay, let's see if this works. Oh yeah, I like how he's turning his head and then just the camera goes right next to his nose. That's kind of cool. Okay, so let's see how the whole animation looks, and we might need to do some changes to the path of the camera since we've increased the strength parameter in the displacement on the form, but let's just do a quick RAM preview and see how it looks. Okay, looks pretty interesting. A little bit different than the thing that I showed you at the beginning in the rendered file, but you know, when you're working with particles, achieving exactly the same results each time you do the same thing, it's not that easy. So I just hope you'll like this one as well. Okay, let's see how it looks. Okay, looks great. I really like it. So let's just play a little bit more. What we can try to do, since we're working 32 bits, maybe we could take advantage of it. So let's just create an overall adjustment layer on top of everything else, and let's apply glow. I really like how the standard glow works with form and particular particles in 32 bits. It's really amazing. Really adds a lot of depth to the final look. Let's increase the radius to 20 and maybe decrease the intensity just a little bit, like a fraction of a point. 0.7 should do, and maybe we can decrease the threshold. And maybe let's just blur it out a little bit more. No, that's too much. Well, basically this is up to you. You have to find out what works best for you, what kind of look you're after. I think I like this one. Let's just see how it looks without the glow. Okay, the difference is very subtle, but we definitely have more depth and it definitely looks stronger. Okay, so I think that's it for this tutorial, and I hope that the rain is over, and I hope that the sun just starts to shine for you right now. And I hope you've enjoyed this video. See you in the next one. Happy After Effecting!